What's up, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Body Lock Podcast. I do not know what number we're on right now. I think 38, 39, depending on what we vaulted, depending on what we haven't vaulted. It's been a little bit of a hiatus for us, a little bit of a sabbatical. Things have been going on here and there. Mortgages, wives, 401ks, all that. No, I'm just kidding. We're just lazy bumps. I'm just kidding. No, really, what's been going on here? Oh, damn.
Will we ever get to the truth?
Well, we
Will
won't
we
ever
ever
get to the
stop
truth.
lying to you?
We are our own propaganda machine here at the TBL podcast, and really, we're just, it's just been a cornucopia of things that have kept us from delivering you, which is honestly one of the funnest things that we did, as part of the team. I think, delivering every week on this podcast was one of the best things. So we're gonna try to get back into that. As steadily as we can, and we're going to start rotating guests for different writers that are on the Body Lock that have been contributing an amazing amount. Although the podcast hasn't been doing that great in terms of activity, the website, if you check us out on thebodylockmma.com, has been bustling. We got a ton of great writers out there and a ton of guys just doing the damn thing for the love of the sport, and it can't get much better than that. And now we're going to hop into things. It's been a pretty busy week in MMA. We got 238 coming right around the pike. And last week we lost a couple of MMA legends, to the octagon. One thing led to another, one performance led to another, and here we are. Alexander Gustafsson, as of right now, no longer part of the UFC after an amazing performance by Anthony Smith. I mean, if there was any fight to categorize just how lion-hearted that man is, this is the fight to look at. I mean, technically speaking, he wasn't necessarily on the same footing as Gustafsson at the beginning of the fight, but slowly but surely he found the right hand. He started commanding respect. He started tactically breaking down Gustafsson in ways that we haven't seen him broken down before by a fighter of lesser caliber. And I thought it was just a great performance all around from Anthony Smith. It's really sad to see Alexander Gustafsson go. For sure, he was one of the bigger names in 205 ever since, the era of Chuck Liddells and Tito Ortiz have come and gone. And it's really sad to see him go. But in his place, I think Anthony Smith has once again given himself a new lease of life in this 205 division. Siri, what do you make of that?
If Gus wanted to, he could have still stayed in the company, and he could have probably beaten mid-tier light heavyweights.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess he doesn't have it in him to fight for the title anymore. He's just not strong enough to keep wrestlers off of him. He doesn't hit hard enough to trade with people when they get in on him. And slowly but surely, he's just, for all his tactics and his length, he can't hang with the big dogs anymore. So I mean, I really do respect the decision to step down. Probably different from the reason that Manuwa stepped down. This weekend also saw Jimmy Manuwa finally hang up his gloves after what people on Twitter were calling one of the scariest head kick knockouts that the UFC has seen.
Yeah,
and that's with a large library to choose from. With all due respect to Manuwa, he felt like Jesus. He just went.
Yeah, he plopped down rather violently.
I mean, and it was a good combination. I think Alexander Rakic was he came in. I think he came in with a 2-1.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or I don't know the boxing lexicon. I shouldn't even attempt that.
I think it was a 1-2, and then he caught him at the end of the combination with the head kick. And kind of, Manuwa.
Yeah, I think it was a left hook.
Yeah, he was reeling back.
When he moved back, he got the head kick right on top of it. And
yep.
Manuwa moving backwards didn't have his hand where he needed to be to block that. It was well set up. Credit to him.
Yeah,
and I mean, Manuwa's gotten waxed in a few of his fights, and he's not even going to sniff the title. So I understand why he's leaving too. That being said, that does leave the light heavyweight division in a bit of a pickle because that division was never really deep to begin with, and now it's a waiting pool.
Yeah, and yes, I do agree with that sentiment, but at the same time, you got guys like Johnny Walker, you got guys like Rakic, and there was one other up-and-coming lightweight. I think they re-signed Sergey Krylov, if I'm not mistaken, the Ukrainian guy. So there is still a young breed of UFC fighters 205 that haven't gotten beat by John Jones. So that could be like, let's just say when John Jones finally hangs up his boots and beats everyone that there is to beat. They all have that metric to try themselves against. Again, it benefited Anthony Smith as we've seen in this fight, and it's going to benefit a lot of other fighters. I think Thiago Santos. Again, I don't see him winning the fight against John Jones, but the experience, the level that he's going to get to test his striking against. What is the pinnacle of the sport right now in John Jones, it's going to prove dividends for them, long term in their career. But I do agree, Gustafsson and Manuwa, where they were at in their career, they were kind of over the hump. Even if they got a fight with John Jones, there's not much that they could use in terms of like developing their game with it. They were already as far along the road as they were going to get. And I do, whether or not this is Gustafsson's last fight, we don't know right now, but I do agree with the sentiment that if you're not motivated for it, you can't do it, and you shouldn't do it. And I think, a lot of guys, they're there for, not everyone obviously, but, there's some fighters that they're just fighting because they have no other avenue, or they need to make a paycheck and this is the only way they know how, and they're simply there cashing in checks but not winning fights and not looking interesting at all in that process. I'm glad that Gustafsson is removing himself from any kind of situation where that could be the case, and he could just move on with his life. I mean, he has a kid, he has a beautiful wife and all that, and there's more to life than just fighting, and I'm sure he can slot himself into any kind of role where he's like an ambassador for the sport, for Sweden or something. He can find a lane, craft a lane within his own region to like really, take his country forward with the sport, and I think that would be the best fit for him. I don't know. Is there anything you want to say in retrospect of Gustafsson's career, Manuwa's career, in terms of things they brought to the table, interesting highlights, interesting moments?
Unless I'm mistaken, I think Manuwa got into the sport pretty late.
Yeah, he did.
It's amazing what he was able to accomplish.
Agreed.
But at the same time, it's very clear. It's become, the more he fought, the clear, the problems that starting so late posed came about.
Yeah, his ceiling was very exposed. Yeah.
Yeah, and hey, listen, he did well. He's got a few great highlights. No shame. Expectations weren't low, but like he came into a sport that he loved pretty late and managed to do some damage, walking out with his health mostly intact, I think.
Right.
Gus,
some of the best title fights of all time at 205.
Lost all.
Yeah, lost all of them, but yeah, he's gonna be. Again, maybe not as a title holder, but he will be there in the memory books, for sharing the cage with some of the best of the best. And, it sucks that he never got that chance. I can't
tell whether it's Gus wasted his potential or if he really did the best he could and he just couldn't hang with the best. Because on the one hand, sometimes his strategy just running away, not trying to, trying to escape wrestlers instead of trying to punish them on the way in when he's getting cornered, all that stuff. Then I think maybe his frame, he's a really slender guy. Maybe he just didn't have that kind of stuff in him. Maybe he didn't know how to properly, beat Daniel Cormier. Maybe he didn't have it in him to close it out against John Jones.
Yeah, and I always lament the fact that the first fight and the rematch were so, many years apart. I would have liked to see a rematch. I mean,
it should have been an instant rematch.
Yeah, we could have had a trilogy now. Depending on how things panned out. It's upsetting to see. But again, I don't think that's a slander on his career. I think he did the best he could. He went with Alliance for a little bit, tried to get some tutelage from Eric Del Fiero and stuff. And I think that's important. He definitely didn't keep himself stagnant. He definitely tried to branch out and develop his skills as a martial artist, and that's the most you could do.
He's arguably Europe's best MMA fighter. Greatest MMA fighter after Bisping in the modern UFC era. Yeah.
There's definitely. There's a couple candidates. I'd have to wrap my head around. Then maybe that'd be an interesting podcast topic. Best like top 5 European fighters. Wonder where Connor would fall on that list for you, Siri. No, but
Oh my gosh.
No, I do agree. He's definitely a decorated martial artist, and he's done a lot for the sport. He's given us a lot of memories. I really enjoy the Daniel Cormier Gustafsson fight. That was probably top 3 title fights at 205 that you're ever going to see, just in terms of back and forth that That's the kind of fight where it's akin to Israel Adesanya and Kelvin Gastelum, where even though there's a loser, there's no loser. Gustafsson kind of
their stocks rise, win or lose.
Yeah, 100%. And and he's delivered a lot of great moments like that. And it's just sad that he has to call it a career, but definitely a career worth having. Point blank, period. And we wish nothing but the best to Alexander Gustafsson and his family. But let's cut right into UFC 238. We're gonna get into our preview mode real quick, and let's start with Cejudo Moraes. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the pictures of Cejudo finishing his training camp. And this is something I wanted to bring up before we talk about the actual ins and outs of the fight. I think every fighter is looking to get that extra thing, whether it's tainted supplements, whether it's fucking pads, or everyone's looking for that next thing. I think Cejudo has actually found the cheat code with whatever training regimen he has going on at Neuroforce 1. I don't know if you've seen any videos or highlights of him training.
I've seen it in the preview vids. I don't know that I mean, he's always been in good shape, you know what I mean?
For sure.
I'm actually not good at that. I'm not good at remembering a fighter's physique from one fight to another.
Mm-hmm.
But Cejudo's always a pretty shredded guy.
Yeah, 100%. And I think what has kind of changed the curve this time around, because again, we're talking about a guy who beat TJ Dillashaw fully on EPO, and he had a different kind of strength, kinetic energy. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. When he stepped into the ring against TJ Dillashaw, it felt like he was unbreakable. And I think it makes sense. Patricio Pitbull is training with the same people, and he has that same level of devastating strength, where he just finished knocking out Michael Chandler, who is another consummate professional, world-class athlete. And to knock out a guy like that, it takes something else. It truly takes something, not just talent-wise, but the preparation has shown itself in spades between everyone that's sharing those trainers. And I think if I'm an MMA fighter and I have the resources for it, I would definitely look into whatever they're doing at Neuroforce 1. It seems like they have the right formula to really bring the best out of a fighter and train him for a fight, rather than bring up an athlete and then just put him in a fight setting. I really like what they've been doing. And again, I'm not too familiar. I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but I think in terms of overall developing a program that works, I think Cejudo has found that formula, and it's been working out great for him. Against Marlon Moraes, though, he hasn't really fought a guy as ruthlessly aggressive as Moraes, in the way that Moraes has no problem putting his body in the line of danger in order to get the strikes that he wants to land, or the clinch advantages that he wants to grab. And I think there's so many ways that this fight could be beneficial or there's so many ways that Moraes' style could be beneficial for Cejudo, but I also see ways in which the chaotic nature of his fighting could spell bad things for Cejudo if he's not careful. How do you see this one shaking out?
Well, so first I want to say I was not that big on Moraes until he finished Rafael Assunção.
Mm-hmm.
Rafael Assunção, in a way, to me, is like Frankie Edgar. Perhaps not as decorated. Frankie Edgar is obviously the better overall fighter.
Mm-hmm.
But that they will not beat themselves. If you finish them, you had to earn it. You had to do something real special.
Yeah.
So Assunção is beatable. I think Dillashaw's beat him. I forget who else, but by narrow margin. But but Moraes stepped in and cracked him.
Yeah.
And the defensive openings Assunção offers aren't that large, and he managed to crack him with what seemed like a looping right hand. Dominated him on the ground. Assunção is a very good ground fighter.
Yeah. 100%.
Obviously, Cejudo is the favorite. You can't beat Demetrius Johnson and then TJ Dillashaw and not be the favorite.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know, is Moraes going to be afraid of him maybe not afraid of him, but is he going to respect the wrestling? Is Moraes going to fight on the outside against Cejudo? Because if Cejudo gets a hold of him, Moraes is good on the ground, but I still wouldn't risk it.
Mm-hmm.
And if he does have to respect Cejudo's wrestling, can Moraes fight going backwards? we haven't really seen it because he just walks up to everyone and beats them.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first couple rounds will tell us everything we need to know, but unless something drastic happens, I think Cejudo should probably, if not finish him by strikes like on the ground in the championship rounds, at least a unanimous decision.
Right, and that's one thing that I've been on record about saying before about Cejudo, that his striking has improved so much in the past couple fights, and that may what has become his biggest strength may be a detriment in this fight, because Moraes is obviously, like, he lives in that chaos of if push comes to shove, he's gonna find that angle, that flying knee, whatever the case may be, to take his opponent off guard and take him out of his element. And I feel like that could happen again in this case. But at the same time, I give the speed advantage to Cejudo. I would say overall, Cejudo has been tougher. I feel like he's able to withstand more damage than Moraes. Obviously, Moraes is no pushover. But I do see certain factors that just inherently give Cejudo the edge. I do believe that there is a chaotic element to Moraes' game that cannot be understated, and it's the kind of thing where you can sleep on it for 4 rounds, and in the 5th round he'll still find a way. So if Cejudo comes out looking to get the win and become a champ, it has to be from round 1 to round 5, just constantly grinding him out and not letting Moraes establish himself, get comfortable in the stand-up, and engaging with him, yes, but not too often to the point where Moraes gets any kind of timing or any kind of rhythm to his game, because that's just going to be detrimental.
Yeah, sounds about right.
So, and now, there's so many fights. At first, you look at the doubleheader, but I don't think this card is about the main event or the co-main. There's a lot more fights. Obviously, we're going to get into Shevchenko and I right now. But there's obviously Tony Ferguson versus Donald Cerrone, and Jimmy Rivera versus Petr Yan, which to me is like, that's going to be the hardcore favorite. But real quick, let's get into Shevchenko versus Jessica Ai. Personally, for me, I don't see a lot. I don't see a lot in this one for Jessica. I mean, she's had some kind of hilarious Tito Ortiz moments. I don't know if you've seen it lately. A couple of our writers have been making fun of that on the on Twitter, with Jessica Ai just kind of putting her foot in her mouth with some of the things that she's been saying, responding to critiques that she's heard of Valentina Shevchenko. Again, I've said it once, I'll say it before. Shevchenko is the most well-rounded MMA fighter in her weight class right now. There's a reason she's champion, and I think there's just going to be another notch on her belt. She's going to be a champion for a really long time, just given the gap of skill between her and the next best thing at that weight division, and I just don't see anything changing hands with this fight. But Jessica Ai is tough. She is extremely resilient. So hopefully she just puts in a good effort and at the very least gives us something to look out for in the future. Because although Shevchenko is regarded as a favorite, that does by no means doesn't mean that you have to just lie down and take it. You know what I'm saying? There are avenues to victory. I just don't see them right now for Jessica. What do you think about this matchup?
I think the thing about 125, the 125 pound division, women's division, is it's still relatively new.
Mm-hmm.
It's really I don't want to say the dumping ground, but it's really where the 135 pounders that are too small and the 115 pounders that like to eat are going to end up. And Valentina Shevchenko was already a small-ish bantamweight. She held her own against Amanda Nunes twice. Let me put it this way: she did better against Amanda Nunes than Ronda Rousey or Cyborg Santos did. So that's something.
Yeah, for sure.
Jessica Ai apparently she did better in her career before she joined the UFC, when she was allowed to fight at a lighter weight, but the UFC only had a bantamweight division. So she had to fight there. Apparently she was too small. She looks better. She looks better at this weight class. But again, it's Shevchenko. I think Ai is really tough. But what's she got that's going to really threaten Shevchenko? She doesn't have the power in her hands. Shevchenko's definitely got faster strikes, and I'll be willing to bet she could hurt Ai way easier than the other way around.
Right.
was she maybe I can throw some double leg takedowns, but at the same time, if like I said, Shevchenko has fought so much better.
Yeah, yeah.
I would like I'd be cool if Jessica I won. She seems cool, but I don't this I something miraculous has to happen for Shevchenko not to win this fight.
Right, and that's the problem with Shevchenko is that she's so cerebral in the sense that you could see Joanna at some point letting the hubris get to herself or something like that, or Amanda Nunes. Maybe she doesn't care so much about one fight to the next and loses one. But Shevchenko is completely not that. She's like the Terminator when it comes to breaking down her opponent and figuring out what it's going to take round by round to like systematically break down her opponent. I don't see anything happening in this situation where Jessica has a crazy upset, barring like a freak injury. Because again, Shevchenko is the golden standard of the division, and that's not going to change anytime soon. But I don't know. What I'm hoping for is a finish this time around. Shevchenko hasn't really been known to.
Yes, some marketability, please.
Yeah, for sure. I think that would really push her a long way. Maybe say something on the mic. Again, she's quadruple lingual. There's so much to sell and to show off about Valentina Shevchenko. Getting a couple finishes, getting a couple good moments on the microphone could do her some good, and hopefully she finds that this weekend. But let's get down to the nitty gritty here, talking about Tony Ferguson versus Donald Cerrone, the people's main event. Siri, I know you're really excited about this one, so I'm gonna let you set the stage, paint the picture on this one. How do you see this one shaking out?
Oh man, I mean, this is. I've written pieces specifically about it. I think Tony Ferguson really is the best lightweight in the world. The more Khabib wins, the more I question that. But for now, I really do think Tony Ferguson is the most dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Donald Cerrone has looked great recently. They're both stand and bang fighters. It's going to be such a good fight.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, like I understand why the UFC is going to give its title holders the top spots, but this card is sold by Ferguson versus Cerrone. Like I genuinely think that's it. That's what's going to carry this card. But Ferguson, I think, is the better fighter overall. I think he should be the favorite. Like if he's the best in the world, he has to be the favorite.
Mm-hmm.
He is coming off of. It's not so bad anymore, but there was a period of huge inactivity where he was also dealing with injuries.
Mm-hmm.
He did well against Pettis. It's so hard to call a fight with Tony Ferguson. Not in that I don't think he's going to win. That part's easy to call.
Right.
But he gets hurt so often. It's so easy to touch his chin. Relative to the elites, It's so much easier to touch his chin. Who's going to crack it? Justin Gaethje's been traded on his chin and gotten to the elite level, and finally, Eddie Alvarez cracked it. You can't trade on your chin forever.
Yeah.
Donald Cerrone, my biggest concern is that because I do want Donald Cerrone to win. Okay, I think if Tony Ferguson loses this fight, he can bounce back. He's got time.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't taken a lot of damage over his career. He's at on an 11-fight winning streak right now, I think.
Yeah.
Tony Ferguson has like an orangutan reach.
Yeah.
For a lightweight, he's 5'10" and I think 76 or 77-inch reach. Something pretty long.
Let me look that up.
And Donald Cerrone, he's never had the longest reach. I actually have a longer reach. But,
76 and a half.
Yeah, 76 and a half. So I actually that's actually longer than Nate Diaz, and Nate Diaz is really long.
Right. Yeah.
Cerrone's weakness, besides his susceptibility to a good hard body shot, is he's not a good boxer. He's gotten a lot better about it. He doesn't just loop punches running forward. He's gotten better with the counter left hooks, maintaining distance, coming in at angles, but it's still not somewhere where he can just trade hands with the best.
Mm-hmm.
And how he's really, obviously he had his difficulties at welterweight, but at lightweight, where he really kind of turned a new leaf, so to speak, is when he started using intercepting knees.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's 6 feet tall. I think now that Michael Chiesa has moved to welterweight, I think he actually might be the tallest lightweight on the roster in the top 10.
Yeah.
I think the only one that's taller than him is Vic, James Vick.
Right.
But
yeah. Yeah.
So they have to come forward to try and tag him, get at his chin, and he'll just slam knees into their guts while they do it. And he might get caught a couple times, but he recovers. They don't. It's happening to so many people. Eddie Alvarez almost TKO'd Donald Cerrone in the first round of their fight. And then every time he dove in after that, he'd just get his gut pulverized. And eventually he got so gassed that Cerrone almost finished him.
Mm-hmm.
Alexander Hernandez started coming forward, landing some big shots in the first round. Eventually, the knees to the gut, leg kicks, wore him down. Same thing with Ally Quinta. Ally and Quinta, better than all the others, didn't eat as many, still ate enough to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Tony Ferguson has a reach advantage. He does not need to dive in on Donald Cerrone in order to touch his chin. So Cerrone's best counter is not going to come into play. He can't count on that. So he has to only count on his leg kicks and his counter boxing and maintaining distance. Can he hack Ferguson's legs and maybe land a head kick? Because, like I said, Lando Venata landed one.
Mm-hmm.
And Tony, defensively, he's not always all there. Can he do that in the first couple rounds before Tony really gets going and just starts standing at range and landing these long punches to the head and body? I don't know.
Yeah.
Another big concern is the turnaround between his win over I Quinta and this fight is like 5 weeks.
Yeah.
5 weeks isn't even long enough for a proper training camp. I'm pretty sure for most title fights, they go for between 8 to 12, right?
And that's customary of Donald Cerrone almost his entire career, which is kind of a negative precursor, in my opinion, when you look at
They're staying active, and then there's just burning the candle at both ends.
Mm-hmm.
And I really don't want him to do that against Ferguson.
Yeah, and Ferguson is not the kind of fighter that you take 5 weeks for and then boom, you're good.
Yeah, I take ring rust over still recovering from damage any day.
Mm-hmm.
So I've already said this, but it's true here as well. First 2 rounds, depending if Donald Cerrone can really hack away at the body and legs in the first couple rounds, he might slow down Ferguson enough that they can just kind of stand and trade at distance, and then he stands a chance. Most likely, Ferguson's just going to wear him down, and then the 3rd or 4th round is just going to start teeing off on him.
Yeah, I could see a similar scenario, and again, I already thought the quick turnaround wasn't going to be a positive, boost when looking at the factors, weighing up Ferguson versus Cerrone, and on top of that, Ferguson is so lethal with what you don't see coming in terms of, his crazy knee bars that he tries to go for, flipping around and trying to grapple with his opponent. I think frustrating Cerrone with that kind of aggression, because you were mentioning there were certain things that Cerrone, you put him in certain scenarios and he just doesn't excel. He doesn't excel in dogfights, and Tony Ferguson lives for dogfights. And in the same vein as Nate Diaz, I don't think that Nate Diaz was a better fighter than Donald Cerrone when they fought, but he was more of a dog, and he made it a dogfight. And when you frustrate an opponent like that, that's looking to be technical, that's looking to be Zen state, and you take him out of that mold. And again, I don't think Tony Ferguson is going to do it in the same respect as Nate Diaz, going for the disrespect, but he is going to keep him off his toes, which has been something that has historically made Cerrone look amateurish, in moments where he needed to shine the most. I hearken back to his fight against RDA, where all the variables were pointing towards success if he could, maintain this angle. Are you falling asleep, Siri?
No. I'm looking at something out of the corner of my eye.
I was about to say. I hope I'm not that bored.
You've been exhilarating so far.
Oh, exhilarating! I like that. No, but I just weighing up those factors, I think Tony Ferguson has what it takes to frustrate Cerrone and put it past him. But again, this is 30 plus fights of UFC experience, where we're talking about 45 fights between the two of them. There's a lot to weigh up here, and Cerrone has given me no reason, to doubt the progress that he's made. But again, when push comes to shove, he has shown himself vulnerable in certain situations against a certain breed of fighters, and I think Ferguson is that breed that's going to frustrate him. But we'll see come fight night. So real quick, we have 2 more fights to talk about on the main card. Which one do you want to touch on first, the Chewyvasa fight or Jimmy Rivera and Petr Yan?
Might as well go in order.
Okay, let's go in order. So first off, Piotr Jan, if you haven't been familiar with him, to me, he is up there with Cody Garbrandt, whoever you want to put in the conversation, Marlon Moraes, as one of the most exciting bantamweight fighters, continuously putting it on his opponents, relentless with the offense, sometimes reckless, always dangerous. Piotr Jan is coming into this fight with a whole bag of hype. You know, he's kind of like, he's almost, and again, I don't want to make stylistic comparisons. I'm just trying to say the rabidness of his fan base is similar to a Triple G, the way that people are just kind of propping him up and saying, oh, he's the next best thing. If Piotr's fighting, that's Piotr time. Everybody else, you know, like there's a nice cult following that's been developing around Piotr Jan, that, you know, amongst the hardcore fans, that is really nice to see and well deserved, because he is really must-watch TV at bantamweight, which is not something you say often for an up-and-coming bantamweight fighter, but he is every bit of that. The only problem is he's fighting against a really experienced stand-up striker in Jimmy Rivera, but I do see scenarios where Piotr Jan can take it to Jimmy Rivera. Jimmy Rivera, for me, he's always kind of been a slow starter, not really one to, you know, set the pace at an early going, and he kind of picks it up in the second and third round once he gets his footing. Piotr Jan has the capabilities to completely throw that out the window. If he wants, he can set the pace and just start going at whatever RPM he wants to hit him with. And I think those are going to be very interesting. You know, the first round tempo is going to tell a lot about this fight, whether it even goes to 3 or not. But the thing is, neither of them are very hittable. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly how this one breaks down. You know, Jimmy Rivera has been knocked out recently, but, you know, and Piotr Jan does land, but he hasn't really shown insane stopping power, the type of stopping power that, you know, has put Jimmy Rivera out. How do you see this one shaking out?
So Jimmy Rivera, I think, is very good. I don't think he's elite.
Mm-hmm.
I think losing to Moraes, there's no shame in it. But I think he also lost to Aljamain Sterling.
Yeah, that was his last loss.
And Sterling is a good fighter. I have nothing against Aljamain Sterling, but he's not like the top of the top. Like, if you are an elite fighter, you should be able to beat Aljamain Sterling.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't.
Yeah.
So this really is going to tell us how good Piotr Jan is. Because I don't want to say Rivera is a gatekeeper, because that is really underselling him, but he is right underneath the elite. So if Jan can beat him, he's for real. Can he? I don't know. I think Jan could stand in there a little more technically. I think Rivera is just, he's, like you said, he's experienced, but he also like carries himself very large in for a bantamweight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed.
You know, and by that I don't mean like the typical towering stature, but he does pack a decent amount of muscle on.
Yeah, I noticed that in the Faber fight, he looked, you know, 2 divisions heavier than Faber in that last fight. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't more than striking, I wonder if Rivera can out-grapple Jan. Because I do think he's strong enough to where he can really tire Jan out if he starts closing the distance on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know enough about. I mean, Jan is still he's a prospect. You know, he's a talented prospect, but he's a prospect. Could he? It's plausible he could win. I think Rivera can take a decision from him.
Yeah, no, I agree. I could see that happening again. I don't think this is going to be a fight where we get a finish, but I do think it's going to be a great fight. It's going to be a great tempo setter to get this card going, and a great appetizer into Tony Ferguson and Donald Cerrone. But to open up the card, they have an even better heavyweight opener. So I know about Tai Tuivasa. Are you familiar at all with Blagoy Ivanov? Can you kind of give a little context as to who he is as a fighter?
Interestingly enough, Blagoy Ivanov, my first experience with him wasn't in WSF or UFC. It was actually his part of his comeback at the, I want to say the Bellator heavyweight tournament.
Mm-hmm.
When he lost to Volkov, unfortunately. But yeah, like dude basically cheated death. As is with a lot of the UFC's heavyweight division, he's a bit rounded, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
More Daniel Cormier and less Francis Ngannou.
Mm-hmm.
He's a scrapper. I fail to call. I don't think he's technical. With all due respect to him,
Mm-hmm.
I think he is best because he's a short, stout guy. He's best when he just gets in there and makes things dirty. He lost to Junior Dos Santos, 2018 Junior Dos Santos, and Junior is still good, but if you want to be really good, you can't be losing to Junior Dos Santos in the heavyweight division. Junior's kind of crested the hill, so to speak.
Yeah.
Tai Tuivasa, I like a lot more because I think his ceiling is a lot higher. That being said, he also lost to Junior Dos Santos, and I think lost worse because I think Ivanov managed to make it to the final bell. I think Dos Santos dropped him with a counter left coming in.
Which to Ivanov?
I think I'm pretty sure he got knocked out, but I like Tuivasa in this fight. I think even his record, Ivanov's record is impressive, but I think so heavyweight division's always been shallow. We know this. The best athletes that are 6+ feet tall and over 200 pounds are playing sports where they don't have to,
right,
punch each other for a living.
Mm-hmm.
There's easier ways to make a living. So the heavyweight division's always been a bit shallow and a bit flabby. So even though Ivanov has the better record, I think Tuivasa has more tools. And anything can happen. It's heavyweight, but it should be Tuivasa's fight.
No, I agree. And there's just been not enough activity, I think, on the side of Ivanov, and he does have like those, obvious physical advantages, but I think Tuivasa, especially coming off this last loss, you're gonna get frustrated. Australian, and as we all know, hanging out with Jake, that's not the best thing. No, I'm just kidding. No, but I do believe Tuivasa he's definitely going to take the lessons that he took from his last fight, implement them into this one, and give the fans a much needed shot to the heart heading into this opener for the main card. Are there any other fights on this card that you want to talk about? A specific fighter you want to shout out before we end up wrapping up the show?
Undercard?
Yeah, undercard.
Pedro
early
Munoz.
Yeah, Pedro Munoz, and yes, that was a great fight.
Pedro Munoz, if not for a very close loss against John Dodson, I still think he's one of the best bantamweights in the world. I think he came out of nowhere. It was one of the earlier fights we previewed when we still worked for 101. When he fought Rob Font. And Rob Font, at the time, was a very, very good fighter. I think he only had one loss.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I remember saying, Munoz is going to be the grappler. Font is going to be the striker, and we're going to see how this goes. And Munoz went out there, and with just beautiful, picture-perfect counter left hooks, dropped Font and made him look amateur. He dropped a split decision to Dodson. I don't know, not too much shame in that. But then he finished Brian Caraway. He knocked out Cody Garbrandt questionably, even if it wasn't a headbutt.
That was a great fight, though. I thought it was, it was a coin flip win, but it was a good win.
I mean, even if it wasn't a headbutt that hurt him.
That's true. I did forget about the headbutt. Yeah.
And Garbrandt seemed to just decide that he was going to throw right hands until one of them fell, and Munoz literally just kept his guard up and fired back and won that exchange. Go figure.
Yeah.
I mean, just watch him fight. I think that fact that he's been buried on the undercard. No disrespect to Ivanov and Tuivasa. I think Munoz should be taking their spot.
Oh yeah, 100%.
On the main card,
especially after that last performance.
Yeah, man. So I know the main card is the big thing, but if you do have to catch one fight on the prelims, I would make it Munoz versus Sterling.
Personally, I would catch all of them because you got Ricardo Lamas, Calvin Kattar opening up the prelims, and then you got my girl Alexa Grasso. Shout out to her. She's fighting Karolina Kowalkiewicz. It's a pretty stacked card. UFC 238, pretty stacked for what it's worth. Again, if you have nothing going on, I'm actually gonna hit the sports bar. So while my Triple G is finishing up, boom, we can get right into Ferguson Cerrone. However, the card is setting up. I gotta be able to watch both. And I don't feel like paying for anything, so that's how I'm gonna handle that situation. But yeah, it was great to finally get back into this. I've been feeling like getting back into the podcast bag for a while now, and I definitely want to start implementing our co-hosts. For whenever one of us can't make it, have some of the very talented writers on our roster feature, and get some different opinions in there because I know I can get pretty stale and boring alongside Siri. No, I'm just kidding.
You undersell us.
Yeah,
or maybe you oversell us. I'm not sure. We have to get more than 2 podcasts in a 3-month span before we decide how we sell ourselves.
Yeah, let's focus on consistency before anything else. But definitely, I'm glad to be back hosting. Previewing some fights. Next week we're going to come back and do the review. Whether or not I'm in New Jersey, well, I will be in New Jersey, but I'll bring up the equipment necessary to make sure we can get a quick review in. Well, it's been great for everyone at the Body Lock Podcast. I'm your host, Nicholas Vera, with my co-host, Siri. Say peace out.
Take care, everybody. Hopefully see you soon.
And a big kiss from me to you. No, just